Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started now. My name is Deirdre Kamlani, and together with my fellow LWV Greenwich Program Committee member, Janet McGuigan, we're delighted to welcome Chief Heavey today for the first in our series of discussions with heads of key downtown departments. The Greenwich League felt that we were in a unique position as a nonpartisan civic organization to help Greenwich residents learn more about how their local government works and to give them the chance to ask questions of leaders like Chief Heavey, who run departments that impact their lives in important ways. Those of you who know Chief Heavey know that he is a lifelong Greenwich resident who has had a long and distinguished career in the Greenwich Police Department, starting as a dispatcher in 1981 and progressing through the ranks until his appointment as chief in 2011. So he has certainly witnessed a great deal of change and growth in our town. During his tenure, Greenwich has been recognized as one of the safest cities in the U.S. Chief Heavey has focused his attention on intelligence-led community policing and leveraging technology to enhance departmental efficiency and community relations. He's also implemented a number of community engagement programs, including a Citizens Police Academy and a youth summer camp. Chief Heavey also served for over 20 years as a military police officer in the U.S. Army Reserve, including a deployment for Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm, where he assisted in liberating Kuwait City. He has volunteered his time extensively here in town with organizations that include the American Red Cross, which awarded him a Lifetime Service Award, the Glenville Fire Company, and Scouting America. So we are really honored to have Chief Heavey with us for the next hour. He will speak for about 20 minutes, and we will then open it up for Q&A. You can type your questions into the Q&A field on Zoom, and we will try to get to as many of them as possible. We'll be alternating your live questions with those that were pre-submitted by you. So we hope this session really reflects the issues and concerns that are top of mind for you. And with that, I am pleased to turn the floor over to Chief Heavey.
Good morning. Again, honored to be here. One of the things that makes Greenwich special is a volunteer. So like the League of Women Voters, there's so much volunteerism in town. It really makes it a special place. And as has been mentioned, I'm not just the police chief, I'm also a resident. Very fortunate to have raised both my children here. And I'm probably, I jokingly said this just to the BET, the Board of Estimate and Taxation, earlier this week, that I'm the biggest cheerleader for the Greenwich Police Department. I feel we're very fortunate to have so many outstanding officers who really make a big difference. And I'm going to talk some letters and numbers, and then answer some of the questions I've already gotten, and then I really look forward to the Q&A afterwards. So just this week, we were recognized by SafeWise as the seventh safest city in Connecticut. Of course, we've been number 1, we've been number 3, we've been number 4, but we've pretty much stayed in the top 12. I'll talk a little bit about why we're not number 1, but it's something that you guys can help me with. And again, it just highlights the fact that creating a safe community is a community effort. It's not just the police, it's everybody. Want to talk a little bit about calls for service in the last year. We responded to over 36,000 calls, and that's everything from a loud leaf blower to a medical emergency, to auto theft and domestic violence, anytime we have a motor vehicle accident, we have to respond to. But I just wanted to kind of highlight like one example of medical calls, over 4,300. Many people might not realize, but your Greenwich police officers are emergency medical technicians. They respond to every medical call with GEMS. GEMS is, emergency room on wheels, and is part of the chain of survival by having our EMTs or medical responders in the police department arrive at the scene and start doing life-saving care before GEMS gets there, and then assisting GEMS throughout the process to get you to the emergency room. We also, the Greenwich Police Department is also the primary public safety answering point for 911. The phone rings in the dispatch center nearly 100,000 times a year. That results in that 36,000 police calls, but also responds to thousands of ambulance calls and also several thousand fire calls. Everything comes into our dispatch center here at the Greenwich Police Department. And one of the things I talk about is, 911's for the real emergencies. But if you have something that you need to report to us, we feel it's important for you to be able to call a non-emergency number and get a person. So you can always call the 622-8004 number and speak to a person to get direction on a particular matter. And, as best we can, we'll try to address it. We don't want you to call to ask if there's school today. I know a lot of parents were very glad that we were in a normal mode today, but things like that. Well, we try to have people use our website and also all our social media. In the early days, in the 80s, when I became a police officer, never thought we would be using social media so much, but we really use it as a tool both to inform the public and engage the public to assist us in crime prevention. Couple other numbers. One of the ones that is, for me, is one of the ones we're always working to try to reduce is our response to domestic violence calls. Over 240 last year, and that's the most serious violent crime that we respond to on an annual basis, and it's somewhere in that 200s number. But we have a great partner in the Harmony Project at the YWCA, and our officers are all trained in responding to domestic violence, and our team effort really has reduced the number of the dangerous situations, but we continue to work on getting that number down. So last year there was a slight increase of about 6%. Motor vehicle accidents. If I had a call in, I have a once a month radio show on WGCH, but if I had a call in show, I think the most common complaint would be speeders. And we do get that on a regular basis. But what we try to do is recognize that we can do something to slow that down. One of the things we do is traffic enforcement. And we've recognized that the more traffic enforcement we do, the less accidents there are. So we had an increase in our traffic enforcement this last year, and that resulted in about a 19% reduction in car accidents. So when people are being mindful of traffic safety, it really does make a difference. And I know that there's lots of questions about the cameras, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. I do want to talk a little bit about some of our letters. So GPD, as it's commonly to Greenwich Police Department, will be 130 years old this year. We're looking to do some celebrating about that and also reflecting about our history. You might have heard about the CAP organization. That's the Community and Police Partnership. We meet with community groups, especially associations that have representatives to the CAP, and our officers in the Community Impact section, the CIOs, have regular engagement, neighborhood association meetings they go to, or our meetings here at the police station to inform people about trends in their particular neighborhood. SROs, school resource officers. We have 2 at Greenwich High School and several officers trained to substitute when they're not available. But this is a program that started about 2009. And it's hard to believe that at that time, prior to that, we actually got a grant for an SRO at Greenwich High School, and we had to turn the money back because the community wasn't ready to have a police officer in the high school. I can only imagine now what would happen if I decided, hey, I'm going to take them out. We think that's a great resource of engagement. And matter of fact, Officer Wallace, one of our SROs, who's also the coach of the indoor track team, was very proud to report that we were state champions just last weekend. So a lot of really good engagement with our high schoolers, and that's another positive. I mentioned CIOs. We also have a Citizens Police Academy. Lots of people have attended this, probably close to 2,000. We offer the class usually twice a year, and it's a mini Citizens Academy for you to learn about what the police department does, and then also what you can do to make yourself less likely to be a victim of a crime. We have self-defense classes. We have forensics classes. All the people who go to the club, to Citizens Police Academy, participate at the pistol range. They go to the Marine Division, go out on the boat, and they also get to ride along for a few hours with an officer in the evening to let you see what the officers do out there. And it is, I think, eye-opening to people. It's also been a launch point for several people to become active in whether they join the volunteer fire department or they become RTM members. And we've had actually some of our elected officials take the class as well and get a little bit of understanding as to what the police department does. license plate reader is another. LPR is another letter. We have several of those in the community now, and we've had nearly a dozen circumstances where those have identified a criminal who's entered Greenwich, and we've been able to make an apprehension. Just last month, we recognized one of our officers who was notified by a license plate reader that a wanted vehicle had come into town. Subject had been it was wanted for domestic violence, where he shot a canine, and we were able to make an apprehension without anybody getting hurt and recover the weapon that he used for that crime in another town. But that's just one of the good success stories. We have a thing called CERT, which is your volunteer opportunity to be part of the police department. And that's a community emergency response team. And they've been activated to help in different things, everything from the town party to help in our animal control division. They receive some specialized training. We actually have a class going on right now with about 10 or so new candidates for that program. And they'll help us during the disaster, like when we open up the EOC, another letter jumble, the Emergency Operations Center here in the police station that we open up when there's a disaster. We also talk about STEP, which is our Strategic Traffic Enforcement Program. We look at statistics on a regular basis to see, rather than where it's easy to find people doing speeding or doing something wrong, we'd rather put them in the places where they can make the biggest impact on changing people's behavior. So that traffic program identifies locations where there's accidents and put the officers there to do traffic enforcement to maybe reduce those accidents. We also have a thing called ORCA, Organized Retail Criminal Activity. And these are officers who are in civilian clothes who collaborate with the owners and the managers of the stores down in the Greenwich Business District so that they can coordinate reducing theft, reducing fraud, and they've done an outstanding job. You've probably heard about some of the great cases that they've made, and again, arrested some really career criminals who have really bad records that have come to Greenwich to try to take advantage of our community. And again, those are just a couple of them. Talk more about numbers. We have about 60% of our officers have bachelor's degrees, a little less than 10% of advanced degrees. We have about 10% of our workforce is female, which we think is a great value added. And again, we always are encouraging, and I don't want to forget to mention to anybody here that's listening or anyone who knows someone of good character, we're going to be offering a test again for a police officer and a test again for a dispatcher. And we currently have probably a dozen openings in the police department. And sometimes it's people who don't necessarily start out with their intent on being a law enforcement person, but we'd like to have people encourage that it's a great career and a great opportunity to serve our community. So I'll hopefully encourage people to check us out. And our community impact officers can talk about careers here. With an agency of our size, there's lots of opportunities to specialize, become a detective, work in a specialty unit, whether you're assisting our most vulnerable populations as a member of our special victims section, which we may be able to talk about a little bit later. I recently went before the BET to talk about budgets, and we talked a lot about numbers. And I mentioned to you before that we're short some officers. We definitely want to encourage more people to sign up, as we do have a force that is both very young. We have a good percentage of our officers have less than 5 years, and then we have about a third of the officers who have reached their retirement eligibility and could leave us. We're hoping to encourage them to stay long, maybe not as long as I've been here, but we really do want to see that workforce be varied and encourage people to fill those positions. Yeah. So now what I want to do is move on to some of the questions that we first had, and just a little plug about our community engagement. Some of you may be members of the Junior League. A number of years ago, the Junior League started a program called Safety Town, and they did that for a number of years and then handed it off to the Red Cross here in Greenwich. And it's an outstanding program for kindergartners. They spend, and this is children who are about to go into kindergarten, they spend a short period of time, a couple hours in the morning or a couple hours in the afternoon for 5 days. We run the program for 2 weeks, and it involves police, fire, Greenwich Emergency Medical Services, the bus company, and our animal control division. And these youngsters, some of whom this is their first time separated from their mom, they get to spend some time learning about safety, whether it's wearing their seatbelts, wearing their helmet when they're on their bicycle, and really kind of encouraging to hear the stories they tell me and the other officers when they go to the program. So we'll be advertising that program, and we hope to sell it out. I think we're returning to the Old Greenwich Civic Center this year, the Cohen Center, as we had done it there many years prior to the renovation. And it's a great program to put our children as they enter school. So a couple of questions here. You guys were very good about that. A couple of questions that came up about ICE. So what I want to do, and that, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, in the state of Connecticut, we have a thing called the Trust Act, which prohibits us from collaborating with ICE on matters here in town. And we haven't really had ICE issues here. However, if there's a report of a crime, we do respond to it. We don't ask people their immigration status because we don't want anybody to be afraid to come to us when they need help. And it hasn't been a huge issue. But again, we follow the law, and we work at trying to make sure that everybody stays safe. The next thing I'll talk about is the school speed cameras. There are 9 areas where these cameras were installed back starting in November, and there was a grace period for a month at each spot where you got warning tickets. However, some tickets have been issued, approximately 7,000. And what we found so far is that there's been about a 90% reduction at 8 of the 9 locations of people who were speeding. And the reason we picked these particular locations were reflecting on the results of traffic safety studies that were done prior to the installation of the cameras near schools. Prior to a public act that was passed 2 years ago, these weren't allowed in Connecticut, but with the state's legislature's approval, we were able to be one of probably the first dozen or so communities in the state that are using the system. That said, people have often asked where the revenue goes. And according to the Public Act, it's being designated to be used for traffic safety. And those in 3 areas: engineering, education, and enforcement. And we hope that the presence of the cameras will reduce speeding even more. Like I said, about 90% in 8 locations. The one location that we still have more education to do is North Street, near North Street School and Greenwich Catholic. And we're hoping that one is about 38% reduction in speeders. But we think that more and more people are recognizing the importance of slowing down near schools. And although they're not happy with the traffic slowing down briefly to get through those zones, we think it overall is improved traffic safety and make people aware of their speed, because I think sometimes with our modern cars, the radio on, we don't recognize that sometimes we're going a little too fast. So general traffic. One of the questions that often is asked is about the officers on Greenwich Avenue. So the officers on Greenwich Avenue haven't been, we don't have officers directing traffic at the intersections anymore, but there's the same number of officers and sometimes more on Greenwich Avenue. I mentioned before the ORCA team, the Organized Retail Criminal Activity. They're out there in plain clothes, so they're not visible, but our bike team is out there, and the bike team monitors those intersections during the busiest times during the weekday, which is lunchtime, and they'll get out and direct traffic when necessary. We found that was a better utilization of those resources than rather than having an officer direct traffic in the middle of the intersection. And then the question often comes up about traffic lights, but traffic lights in the state of Connecticut would require a traffic light overhead at each lane. And you can imagine what the amount of hardware we would have to put at those small intersections to make that possible. So again, when necessary, we shift and deploy officers there to make sure it's safe. We're just last week, regardless of how cold it was, we're talking about getting ready for the sidewalk sales in July. and having our officers deploy there when necessary. Some crime questions. Stolen cars. I can only encourage everyone to lock their cars everywhere, every time. And that if we had everyone lock their cars every time, everywhere, we wouldn't have any stolen cars. And I'm sure that our statistic on being the safest city in Connecticut would go up. But we did have, about 80 cars stolen last year, almost 100 the year before, 130 the year before that, and almost 100% of that was a car that was unlocked and had the keys in it. And some of these some newer cars, actually, when you lock the doors, the side mirrors turn in. So if your unlocked car is left somewhere, a criminal can see that the car is unlocked, and then hopefully the key fob or the key is left in the vehicle for them to steal. Now, if it's locked, that's less likely a chance that they'll get away with it. And the other thing it does is it invites criminals into our town, because we've had an unfortunate reputation for being an easy mark for these high-end vehicles to be stolen. And they steal them for purposes of committing other crimes anonymously. And then we recover the vehicles, a good number of them, probably 80% of them, but often they're damaged. And of course, all of us pay for those stolen vehicles or damaged vehicles that are recovered in higher premiums. So we really would be great if we could cut down on vehicles being taken. Leaf blowers. So we responded to about over 500 leaf blower calls last year, and did do a few summonses for frequent people who had had been given a warning and didn't follow through with stopping. But it is an issue. One of the things that we're hoping to do, we did some last year, we hope to do again this year, is collaborate with the Conservation Commission so that we could communicate more effectively with landscapers to get the word out for them to comply. But there were lots of things where there was noise being made, and the officers went to investigate it, and it was found to be something that wasn't a violation, whether it was an electric leaf blower, or it was some other lawn care device that was making noise. So we have to kind of look at those. And each of those calls took probably 20 minutes. And often the officer either got there and the person was already gone, or they weren't in violation. So as we start to get ready for that season again, our community impact officers and the Conservation Commission will collaborate to try to get the education, get the word out there, and try to get greater compliance voluntarily. Because the last thing we want to do is give somebody a ticket for trying to keep their lawn nice. One of the questions was about the high school and safety at the high school. Very fortunate that almost 2 years ago now, we were able to get a safety vestibule installed in the glass hallway at Greenwich High School. Greenwich High School is a place where there's about 3,000 people concentrated during the day. So it's a major concern for us to maintain safety. And we need to, make sure that we collaborate with the Board of Education's security team. And Mr. Reeves, who is a retired Greenwich sergeant, heads up that department. And then we have the 2 school resource officers there as well. We do a lot of training in not just the high school, but in all the schools, whether it's lockdown drills, fire drills, safety type things that happen on a regular basis. So again, just making sure that I think we have a good program set up, and we're always, again, looking for people to cooperate, like using the main entrance and signing in and all those types of things that maybe a minor inconvenience, but keep everybody safer in the building. The question of whether somebody comes to the front door and they're dressed like me, but you're not sure it's a police officer. Again, you call our non-emergency number, say, hey, a policeman just rang the doorbell and I'm not sure it's a policeman. They're going to be able to tell you right away whether or not that person is there. There's locators on all the police cars. And of course, we also have body worn cameras that we wear, so that there's always documentation when we're dealing with the community. So if you're not sure, you're a little suspicious about it. It does also make me want to remind everybody that one of the statistics that's gone up quite a bit, almost 70%, is frauds that are committed either by the internet or by phone. And there's often these criminals who take advantage of our vulnerable populations by trying to call them and say, I'm the IRS, or you owe on your electric bill and you need to give me your credit card right away or you're going to get your power shut off. So we are constantly doing educational programs to remind people that the IRS has your number, but it's not your telephone number, and that most of these criminals who are trying to fast talk you into giving them personal information is not real. And we've had some significant losses, but we've also had some great successes with our detective bureau following up on these criminal matters. So regardless of your embarrassment, if you are a victim of a scam, we want to know about it right away. So maybe we can recover some of your loss and also get the word out. So maybe we can prevent that from happening to others. E-bikes, a lot of new laws. And if you go to our social media, talk about the amount of power on certain bikes restricts them to people who only have a driver's license. Our SROs and our officers who handle a lot of the youth matters have been educating our youth about wearing their helmet and about which bikes they're actually allowed to have. And again, you have challenges. Greenwich Avenue and Sound Beach Avenue, those sidewalks do not permit anyone from operating a bicycle at all, pedal or electric, because of the potential for injury to pedestrians, other people walking on the sidewalk. So again, a challenge for us. And again, it's always a collaborative effort between the parents and us to educate the children and make sure that the parents aren't purchasing something for their child that isn't really appropriate. Question came up about AEDs, another alphabet thing, automatic external defibrillator. I mentioned that all the forces train medically, and in all our marked cars, we carry a defibrillator and oxygen and other medical equipment. And almost every year, there's a few officers who are able to get to a scene of a cardiac arrest and able to apply the defibrillator and CPR and save a life, and then have the GEMS medics, again, as a team, able to save a life. So again, very important. Matter of fact, in the month of March, we think about reminding people to take a CPR class and know first aid as a part of making sure your family stays safe. And I want to talk about, I guess, one more thing, and then I'm going to come back to Q&A. We had some challenges these last couple of weeks with snowstorms. We want to remind everybody to, if you're on a snow emergency road, you need to get your car off the road so that the Public Works Department, who does an outstanding job, could get that moving so they can open up the roads, and that you're allowed to park in municipal lots during a snow emergency without fear of parking ticket. Unfortunately, we did have to give out a few tickets, a few cars were towed, but we'd rather voluntary compliance with that. And I know there were certain neighborhoods who felt like they were underserved or overserved, but we try to work with their associations and with the public to get those things to happen. So I fast talked because I wanted to get a lot of information out there, but I'll turn it back over to Deirdre, who's going to probably give me some even harder questions.
Thank you so much for all your insights, Chief. That was terrific. And thanks for going over some of the pre-submitted questions as well. We had some questions come through during your talk, and we also have a large volume of pre-submitted questions, as you know, and we're going to maybe drill down into some of those a bit further. We may not get to everyone's questions, but we're going to do our best to hit the ones where we saw themes developing with like multiple questions asked about the same issue. And actually, the two biggest issues that were raised by folks were the speed cameras around schools. I think we had the most questions on that. And the second was about the relationship between local policing and ICE, and you've already addressed some of those things. But let's go back to the speed cameras if we could. Will you give the chance for the public to comment on the traffic cameras that are already around the schools? Maybe after assessing how they are operating, say in the next 6 to 9 months, there's sort of one camp of folks who ask questions saying that they were surprised by them, found them maybe disruptive and not sure how they're working. Will there be an evaluation phase and for public comment? And do you foresee that some of those might be removed or changed? But on the other side, there were communities who said, we want speed cameras. We had questions from folks in Byram and around the schools in Riverside and Old Greenwich and Coscob saying, when might we get speed cameras? So maybe you could address those.
Sure. So one of the things that the traffic study did was looked at all the schools in town, everywhere in town, public and private, and identify the locations where there was the most number of speeders. So we trying to, economy of force, we took those numbers and identified those locations as being the most dangerous. We certainly are welcome community input. I think we'll do a traffic study again at the end of the school year and look at where they were the most successful. The other thing is that like Central Middle School, which I was very fortunate to spend quite a few. I attended quite a few meetings about the layout of the new school, Central Middle School, because of course I'm wanting to have some input about traffic safety and general safety of the building. So we were very glad that the building committee incorporated us into that. There may be a need for the traffic camera change there because the traffic pattern may change. So we could look at those again. And we did have when the Public Act came into being, we prepared a change to the town ordinance, and it went before the local traffic authority, which is the Board of Selectmen. They had the 2 readings and everything, so it wasn't like we were doing this in the dark. Perhaps people didn't recognize that it wasn't an RTM approval requirement, but it was a Board of Selectmen approval. So we would certainly look at that, and we may well see that. Just the mere presence of the cameras is having a positive effect near those schools. One thing that I have looked at is possibly putting some type of signage underneath the warning camera ahead and having the hours in which the camera enforcement happens. There was some confusion about the flashing lights. When the flashing lights are on near a school, that means you have to slow down to that posted lower speed. But in between that, when the lights turn off and the lights turn back on in the afternoon, you have to maintain your normal speed. So on Glenville Road, it's 20 miles an hour when you go past Eagle Hill School when the lights are flashing, but then it returns to 30 during the rest of the day. And of course, we want everyone to go the right speed limit all the time, not just when the camera is on. But so again, we'll look at those changes, and there has been both negative and positive input about the camera. So, and it's some locations, some schools just don't. It wouldn't be adequate for us to set up a camera. But nothing is beyond consideration.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great. So we've got a lot of live questions, and again, the themes seem to be traffic and speed cameras. So I will ask this latest one. As a resident, I'm increasingly concerned about safety and traffic flow on Greenwich Avenue, particularly with cars frequently double parking and delivery trucks treating the main roadway as the loading zone. Is there a plan to more actively manage or enforce curbside use so the avenue functions safely for drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists?
So again, it's one of those things where we're chasing some of these violations. As many people know, Parking Services was a separate agency that is now back under the auspices of the police department. So Deputy Chief Jim Bonney is now the head of both General Services and Parking Services, and we are trying to get our parking enforcement officers to be part of the plan to address the avenue. But I personally give out a ticket or two on myself going down Greenwich Avenue when I'm coming back to headquarters. But I could do a ticket and or better yet, get the person to move, which is better. I'd much rather get compliance and change behaviors than give someone a ticket. But I do that, and then as soon as I turn on to Elm Street to go into the back of headquarters, there's somebody else there. There is a restriction for commercial vehicles doing deliveries on Greenwich Avenue. It's supposed to be done prior to 10 a.m. So again, perhaps we can do kind of more where we do that STEP program where we do heightened enforcement for a week or two to get people to recognize the importance of complying with those regs. An example of that is during the first 2 weeks of school at Greenwich High School, especially with the new moms, dads taking their kids to school and the new drivers, we kind of but a lot of resources, all our traffic, motorcycle officers go over to the high school to get people to comply with not dropping people off on hillside and going in the right entrance, leaving the right exit. So it could be something like that. So again, it is something that we do get complaints on. But that said, if an officer was directing traffic at the intersection, which people are often nostalgic about, that officer isn't allowed to leave the circle or the intersection. So he or she wasn't able to go and do that enforcement. The bike unit is a little bit more flexible and they can do that more often.
Just getting back to the questions about the relationship between our local police department and federal immigration enforcement. If people in sort of military garb, verbally identifying as ICE or say Border Patrol were to come to Greenwich, if they were to try to take someone away, can that person call the police, or can bystanders call the police on their behalf if, for example, they believe that to be a mistake, a citizen, a permanent resident, so on and so forth? What can local police do to help in this instance?
So if somebody calls us and says, hey, there's people in uniform, they're not identified as law enforcement, and we would respond. And if they're doing their federal law enforcement, we would not interfere with that because we're not allowed to by state statute. If it's a suspicious person, not law enforcement, federal law enforcement, then we would take the appropriate action. But again, hasn't been an issue here. So we don't get notified that ICE is coming to town if they do come. And they most frequently have some identification on them that shows that they're a law enforcement. You know, one of the benefits, if you notice, one of the statutes in the Connecticut, all law enforcement officers have to have their name on their outermost garment, and we have the body cameras that we wear, so we don't have the same challenges with identification. And again, you can call headquarters to make sure that we are, in fact, our officers. I will say, though, if you have a civilian clothed person who's identifying themselves as a police officer, don't rely solely on the presentation of a badge, but ask for a credential. All our detectives, they're in plain clothes, but they'll have their badge, but they'll also have a credential signed by me that shows that they are an active member of the department for those types of investigative things.
All right. Could you address the privacy of camera data and being sure Blue Light Solutions or the town do not share or sell data?
Okay, so we do not share any data on license plate readers for anything other than law enforcement purposes. And I know there's been some concern about other agencies that have shared their information with perhaps federal agencies, but our cameras are not that brand. And I will say, I'm part of the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association, and recognize that there may be some legislation to restrict some of the use of that. But that data belongs to us. It's handled by that third party, and they can't release it to anyone without our permission. So, but I will tell you that I have about a dozen or so criminal matters where between New York, Connecticut, other agencies in Connecticut, that by sharing the information for strictly law enforcement purposes, we've able to find lost persons, make criminal arrests, recover weapons, those types of things. But we are currently not. Again, we follow the Trust Act, so we don't share any of that data with ICE. And there may be some discussion about how much of that data, how long we keep the data, but those license plate readers are, generally speaking, are in on the public highway. So there's only a reasonable expectation of privacy in those areas. So again, we're only going to use it for lawful purposes.
The next question has to do with property crime. I know you addressed cars, which was great. What strategies are you employing to deal with the proliferation of home evasions and robberies in backcountry?
Well, I'd like to know where they're happening, because they're not in my statistics.
Okay.
You did have a person physically removed from their car and a car stolen. That's often referred to as a carjacking, but that's a robbery when you use physical force against someone else. So that's a robbery. That's a serious crime. We've had one in the last few years, one in the last year anyway. A burglary is some of the challenges. We just recently made an arrest using some of that technology on an individual who had been committing second floor burglaries in town. So we haven't had a home invasion where, somebody has forced anybody, but a burglary where someone breaks into a house, often where it's unoccupied. Some of the challenges with those are people have alarms but don't use them. People don't lock the doors and people can walk in. They leave their house in a condition which makes it inviting to a burglar. And that includes a week's worth of mail in your mailbox, newspapers on the end of the driveway where you could almost make it into, say, rob me, because they stack up. Not having some lights on timers or some motion or noise in your house. So some of the burglaries have occurred in houses that were pitch black dark and had vulnerabilities like not having their alarm on, and not having the second floor windows properly secured. So we think it's important for people to make themselves a hard target. And to that end, our community impact officers, several of them are trained in physical security, and they'll come out and give you an honest assessment. We can't give you a reference as to what's the best lock or what's the best alarm company, but we can recommend maybe some things you can do, whether it's trimming a hedge so that the front windows are visible, or things that you can do to make your house a harder target. And there's no charge for that. And the officers will come out and kind of do a professional assessment of what you could do to make yourself safer in your community, in your particular area. I know some alarm companies are hardwired and some have cell connections. So you have to make sure that you have a reliable company and that you maintain it. I think the biggest challenge is people install something and then they have one or two false alarms and then they stop using it. You need to make sure that it's adequately installed and properly maintained. I know that whenever I leave my house, I turn my alarm on. And then the other thing too is have a relationship with your nearby neighbor that, you grab their packages when they're away, they do the same, that trusted neighbor. And it actually brings an excellent point into the community. Making Greenwich safer is by, if you see something, say something. If you call us up and I live on a dead end street and I see this car, it's been there for half an hour, and we go and check it out. We're not going to make fun of you because we found out, well, it was an Uber driver or a limo, or it was a delivery person who was looking at trying to find out their directions. We'd rather check the thing out and know that it's safe than something happens to one of your neighbor's houses, they get broken into. He said, yeah, I saw this van, but I didn't want to call. You'll never, we'll always, we'd rather have you call and have the incident checked out if there wasn't a problem, rather than you regret it later. So again, those are things that we can all work together to reduce crime.
All right, here's an interesting question. How does the advent of AI impact the Greenwich Police Department's work?
Wow. So if I took a search warrant or an arrest warrant up to court today, and matter of fact, our court officers took some up, they had a prisoner and they had a couple of warrants. The first thing the prosecutor reviewing that before it goes to the judge will ask, was this report produced in any way by AI? And if it is, they're going to reject that application. Same thing with a warrant. So today, as we speak, AI is really not something that the police department can use for documentation. It has to be you're sort of like, it's my homework, and everything in those four corners of the paper has to be my work. We don't use AI. Now, that said, I think that at some point, AI may be used for some advantage in law enforcement. Some of that is we use real-time crime data, where we keep track of where things happen, and we could maybe plot a map to show where accidents are happening, like a particular intersection, say Mason Street at East Putnam Avenue, that an increase in accidents, and that the AI might be able to identify that to the traffic sergeant so he can send out officers to do enforcement there. But right now, AI and the PD are working together, although it may be something that in the future will happen.
One of our residents said that she was badly bitten by a dog in Old Greenwich and discovered that there was a very small penalty for the owner in such event. She said it was a $100 fine. So, can the town do more to enforce leash laws, and how do local residents protect themselves?
Sure. So again, I said I'm a resident too, and I'm at Greenwich Point frequently. I walk there all the time, and it is frustrating that some people are not complying with our laws. First of all, the state statutes for all our laws, including the dog laws, is set by the state. So that fine is set by the state. We don't really get involved in that. And of course, people don't realize too is the revenue from any of those tickets doesn't come to Greenwich either. It goes almost exclusively to the state, with a couple of rare exceptions. I did propose to the Board of Estimate Taxation just a few days ago to add a third animal control officer to the town of Greenwich. During the pandemic, we had animal control was empty. People adopted animals, and we had, it was a different world then. But now, animal control has quite a few animals, and we do everything we can to get the cats adopted rather than euthanize. And rarely do we euthanize an animal unless it's for fatal injury or illness. So we would love to have more officers to be able to enforce those laws. We have 2 animal control officers. They do an outstanding job. They care for animals. They really care about the town. They're doing a lot of community outreach, whether it's vaccine clinics or reminding people to license their dog and get their proper shots. But we would like to have more opportunity. I know we did some animal control enforcement in the Pomerantz property, another great historical park that I like to visit. And we did give out some tickets, but we can't be everywhere. And unfortunately, if you go down to Greenwich Point, or you go down Greenwich Avenue, just anecdotally, you can see that half the license plates during the season where we don't check beach guards is out-of-state plates. So, so we're constantly educating people. I have the big orange sign that people don't have complained about, reminding people to clean up after their dog and to properly leash the dog. So, whether we get the third animal control officer or not for this budget season, we'll continue to try to get that asset over to the areas where there's complaints. To address them, but it is one of those concerns we have. I wish we had more resources to send.
Does the Greenwich Police Department have the race relations issues that we have sadly seen in departments in other parts of the country? If yes, what are you doing to address this? And if not, to what do you attribute your success in not having these issues?
So I think the biggest thing is community trust. And although not everybody might agree with what I've presented today, even, I think what people should recognize is that we consider every time we do something positive that it's kind of a little bit of a positive relationship token that goes into the bank. And then on those occasions where we aren't perfect and we do make a mistake, that people recognize that it was a mistake of the head, not the heart, and that we do what we can to correct that. We do so much outreach with so many different communities. From Chief McHugh from the fire department and Tracy from GEMS. We were down at the ice cream social at the Greenwich Boys and Girls Club last weekend and last Friday, and during the break, and really positive that there's all of these opportunities for us to interact with the public. And again, I wish more of my officers were able to, our officers could live in the community. We only have about a dozen officers that still live in the town. When I was a young police officer, about 3/4 of us lived in town, and we were the scout leaders and the baseball coaches and those types of things. But unfortunately, just economics don't allow very many of our officers to remain in town. So it's something that we're constantly renewing our effort to be positive in our relationship with the townspeople. One thing that I credit the community impact officers with is that relationship they have with all the housing, the Greenwich Community Housing Authority groups, where they go in and do some outreach where some of the youth get to experience police officers in a non-threatening, non-criminal manner. We have a Youth Citizens Police Academy every June for middle schoolers. we take them. We have students come in for a week, and they run physical fitness training every morning. They go to similar classes that the adult Citizens Police Academy go to. We spend one day at Greenwich Point doing some team building exercises, and then they go to the Boy Scout camp up on Riversville Road and get to do the climbing wall and get to see all the specialty units like our special response team and our drone and some of our technology. So that's kind of another way where we can build that trust for those children, so that when they become adults, they're not feeling like a bad relationship they have with the police department is going to interfere with their rights or privileges.
Great. Could you talk a little bit about the role of de-escalation in modern policing and stabilizing potentially violent situations and reducing the need for force? And is de-escalation training employed by the Greenwich Police Department?
Absolutely. It's almost one of those things. It's common practice. Just 2 weeks ago, I had to go to my annual de-escalation training where we review what the parameters for use of force are. We talk about our body cameras and how we deploy those. One of the real positive about the body cameras is that we now have the documentation when the officer has an exchange if somebody makes a complaint. And initially, the officers were concerned that they were going to have some trouble with that, but they've really they've demonstrated more often than not that the officers do the right thing. Every Greenwich police officer has a full week training on crisis intervention training, and that's to help with dealing with people who are emotionally disturbed or having a crisis, so that they can de-escalate the situation and also get them the right resources. I talked more a little bit earlier about our collaboration with the YWCA, but we also go work with Human Services in the town, so that if people are in the need of services, we get that. So one of the things we're very proud about now is the amount of training that we do, and our training exceeds the minimum. Although I will say that Connecticut's requirements for training exceed many other jurisdictions, where some officers might go to the police academy and they get very infrequent review training. But here in Greenwich, to a great extent, we get a lot more than the minimum. And then in the state of Connecticut, our minimum requirements for annual training far exceed most other states. We have to go to a recertification. My police powers expire on July 1st. I've had to get 60 hours of review training in different aspects of policing over the last 3 years. I had to do 20 hours this year for my EMT. And then, of course, I have to qualify with my weapons and with the non-lethal tools like my baton, our pepper spray, and our taser. So all of those not less than lethal uses of force training, we get that on a daily basis.
That's fantastic. So, what is the best way for Greenwich residents to be sure we are receiving all pertinent information from the Greenwich Police Department and not just emergency information?
Sure. So I would still encourage people to sign up on the Everbridge program for storms. Like we had some challenges in Byram about people on snow emergency routes a few weeks ago. We tried to get the word out over the PA and knocking on doors and calling registered owners of vehicles. Unfortunately, some cars had to get ticketed and towed. But the Everbridge system is like a reverse 911 that we put. If you sign up for it, you can get information about emergencies, and it really does make a difference. And then we also have our webpage with lots of information, and the town webpage. We put stuff out on if you sign up for the First Selectman's email blast every Friday. We put things on it, and then we have a lot of social media. I'll be honest with you, the younger officers have gotten me. I do everything but Snapchat. That's the only one I haven't done yet, but I'm on all of the different social medias platforms so we can get the word out to people. And I think that's one of the challenges today is that everyone goes to a different thing. One of the challenges we have right now is with Greenwich Channel 79. They want to regionalize that. And I really hope that they don't do that, both just for public engagement with the with the town running to the town, so you can go to RTM meetings and BET meetings and see what's happening, but also the stuff that we can put out as far as information about crime prevention and those other important things. So I think some people you look at social media or look on their phone and they're reading the paper, and there's people who commute to New York City every day and they read a lot about New York City, but don't pay attention as much as they could or should to their to the news here in town. We've had experiences like that where we go to a neighborhood where there's been some crime and the neighbors aren't aware of it. You know, whether they, you know, that's another team thing is all these associations, Northwest Greenwich Association, Round Hill Association, Deer Park, you know, all these different communities that have their own associations. We collaborate with them to communicate information, and that makes a big difference too. So if you live in an area that has an association, I'd encourage at least making sure you're on their email and get their newsletter. And a lot of times we share that information with them as well.
That's great. Well, we've covered so many topics. I think we have time for one more question. So maybe I'll just wrap it up with this one. Chief, what are some concerns and/or future projects the police department is working on now? And are there volunteer opportunities at the police department?
Sure. So I'd encourage people, if they're interested in helping us, they could join the CERT team, the Community Emergency Response Team. Again, the thing that keeps me up most at night is not the crime rate, but just making sure that we have adequate personnel. So I just had some interviews this week for police officers positions, but we still have a lot of openings. So we're encourage people to maybe consider law enforcement here in Greenwich as a career. And we are also having our 130th anniversary of police department. When the trains came to Greenwich, so did crime. So that's how we got kind of our start. And we're going to have a celebration of that and reminders about our historical values that we've been part of the community for so long. So again, if you're interested, you can contact our community impact officer, Sergeant Ryan Carino, or Officer Sabrina Diaz, or Danny Palladino. I mean, I'm pretty excited. They actually are getting their own dog, Mason. He's not going to be a patrol dog, but he's a black lab, and he's still got a couple months of training, and he'll be making some additional appearances. So we'll get that engagement as well. So
that's great. Oh my gosh. Well, we covered a really broad range of topics today. Thank you. I just want to extend our sincere thanks to Chief Heavey for taking the time to speak with us today. And I hope everyone here now feels more informed about how our local police force works to keep us safe and engaged as citizens. We also hope you'll join us on March 24th to hear from UConn Professor Tyler Page, who'll talk about his insights from Red and Blue America and how we can build a healthier politics. So stay tuned for future community conversations with town leaders. I hope you all have a great day, and thank you again, Chief Heavey, for this event.
Thanks for having me.